Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, we're going to dive into a theoretical topic and try to answer the question of how good an all-text Civ would be if it were added to the Civ roster. If you're unsure of what all-text refers to, this is the original name for what's now called full tech tree, either in the scenario editor or when creating a game. With that enabled, any civilization you pick will have every generic technology and unit unlocked, meaning as Britons you would have eagles, steppe lancers, elephant archers, battering rams, and armored elephants, as well as things like thumbring. The catch is you lose all Civ bonuses and your unique technologies at the castle, and the question we're going to dive into is whether or not an all-tech Civ would actually be any good compared to the existing civilizations. It's a more difficult question than it seems at first, depending on how much you value Civ bonuses against missing techs. But between a close look at the stats of existing civilizations and some theorizing, I think we can reach some pretty reasonable conclusions. The obvious place to start is of course by looking at some of the closest existing civilizations to this, and the reputation they have. Byzantines immediately come to mind, as they're known for having among the most open tech trees, while also lacking a Dark Age bonus, making them an appealing proxy for our theoretical all-tech Civ. In this case though, we're off to a rough start. Whether it's all maps combined or just Arabia specifically on 1v1s or team games, Byzantines have a notable issue early, dropping a lot of quick games. Other civilizations with a bit of that open tech tree but a weak or non-existent Dark Age bonus profile include Spanish and Saracens, which according to the stats also get out to a bit slower start. Just look at Mongols in contrast if you need an example of how much a good Dark Age bonus can help. Part of what's going on here is most civs have a nearly complete tech tree in Dark Age and Feudal already. The only thing you'd really be adding for an all-tech civ in most cases is just Eagle Scouts in Feudal Age, which are very slow to train, and even civs that have them rarely use them early. The other somewhat commonly missed feudal tech is of course Bloodlines, which Byzantines at least are missing. The conclusion for the early game though is an all-tech civ would be relatively slow, and the closest examples we have show they'd be a pretty bad Dark and Feudal Age civ, possibly even the worst in the game. A good example is the Bengalis, who lack a Dark Age bonus and then get 2 free villagers when they hit Feudal, and seem to win about 44% of games lasting under 20 minutes, slightly below the Byzantines' 44.5%. That's probably about what we'd see from an all-tech civ, as in the first 20 minutes, you're almost guaranteed to be playing a bit behind. Now that said, if an all-tech civ makes it through the Feudal Age, in Castle Age, things start to get a bit more interesting. Maulians are worth pointing out here, as while they're pretty unique for almost having the supposed full tech tree in Feudal in Castle Age, just missing Gambizans, and otherwise having all non-regional units, if you know that little piece of trivia, they sound like basically an all-tech civ already. What that leaves out though is that Maulians are lacking elephant archers, eagles, steppe lancers, and battle elephants, so even Maulians are pretty far from being a true all-tech civ, even if by the standards of the game they have admittedly a fairly wide tech tree. What jumps out to me here though is you have some potential unit combos, which existing civs lack. For example, by my count, only 16 out of the 45 civs have both fully upgradable knights and crossbows in Castle Age, so even that alone is relatively uncommon. Only 9 of those can then add in camels, and only 3 can then add in steppe lancers. Cumans and Mongols have very unique and powerful economies, so it's hard to read into their success, but Tatars are actually surprisingly close to our all-tech civs so far, with the only major bonuses coming into play by Castle Age being their herdables having more food, free thumbring, and a better hill bonus. It probably tells us something then that Tatars are still pretty far below average in 1v1 Arabia stats through the mid-game, which doesn't bode well for our all-tech civ yet again. Maybe then a more promising angle to consider is that an all-tech civ could use some unit combos that currently don't exist at all in the game. One example is Eagles plus Knights. I don't know if this really gives you more against archer civs in general, considering fully upgraded Knights already take more arrows than Eagles, but the Eagles are at least giving this composition a bit of bonus damage against monks and conversion resistance. The arrow resistance of Eagles might then also offer something combined with steppe lancers or camels, and at the least psychologically, an all-tech civ using these sorts of combos would get players out of their comfort zone. Another factor going on is that even with all-techs enabled, civilizations still get their unique units. So now let's consider how one of those might come into play, assuming we got to choose. This opens up a bit of a can of worms, as you might immediately think of a few that seem to get better by having access to all techs. Imagine longbows with thumbring, for example, firing 18% faster and with 100% accuracy. It really sounds amazing until you remember all civ bonuses and unique techs are gone, so they lose 2 to 3 range, and I'd argue longbows are actually significantly worse off. They'd basically just be generic crossbows with +1 attack that require castles, being not so impressive upon reflection. In fact, a lot of unique units that fill interesting roles or are considered among the stronger unique units would actually be nerfed by being given to an all-tech civ. Huskarls and plumed archers lose their discount, Magyar Hussars keep their gold cost permanently, Berserks, Mamluks, and Janissaries then lose their civ's HP bonuses, Samurai, Magadai, and Conquistadors all attack slower, and Lightus lose their relic bonus. Cataphracts then lose Logistica, but pick up Bloodlines and Blast Furnace, so maybe come out looking alright, or at least better situationally. Sergeants, though, are strictly worse off, losing the ability to build donjons, as with all techs enabled, Sicilians just have regular towers. None of these are particularly appealing in this case, despite many having a good reputation. In terms of unique units I'd actually want in an all-tech civ, personally I like the Gabetto. It's not reliant on a civ bonus to be good, and gives a somewhat unique aspect, being a ranged melee unit with good speed. The Hussite Wagon also comes to mind, as even without their unique tech, completely unupgraded, it can still be a scary unit in Castle Age. The Arambai is then better off than usual, getting armor upgrades that Burmese currently lack, and it gives you a nice rating option in Castle Age. One interesting thing to note as well is that the Slinger is considered a unique unit for all-text purposes, replacing the hand cannoneer in an all-text version of the Inca's archery range. They end up lacking +1 attack, some armor, and don't have a food discount, but still might be my pick regardless. I think a Slinger and Knight combo in Castle Age would be clever, protecting each other from their skirmisher and spearline weaknesses respectively. It's probably the best argument I can think of for why an all-tech civ might be better in the mid-game than you'd initially think, as we never get to see examples of usually impossible combos like this in 1v1s. Still, if Byzantines or Tatars are anything to go by, our nice open tech tree in the mid-game probably isn't enough to overcome the complete lack of bonuses we're working with. Now though, let's move on to the Imperial Age, where I'd argue an all-tech civ might actually be above average, potentially even a strong civ in the right hands. Again, going back to our most open tech tree examples, it doesn't start out promising, with Byzantines, Spanish, Saracens, and we could throw in Chinese, all having decent but not amazing late games in the stats despite their very open tech trees. In fact, looking at the worst civs in team games where we'd expect a good late game to be helpful, we see Byzantines, Chinese, and Aztecs showing up. So an open tech tree or access to eagles don't necessarily save a civilization from being a basement dweller. Keep in mind, in all tech civs, eagles would also be by far the worst eagles in the game, lacking the extra armor, attack, and HP of the existing ones. I still think the secret weapon here though is finding unit combos that currently don't exist in the game and developers hadn't balanced with in mind. For example, personally, I like the potential of an eagle, hand cannon, and bombard cannon combo. The hand cannon protects against any champions that your eagles would normally get destroyed by, eagles give you something anti-archer or anti-skirmisher, and the bombard cannon could snipe enemy onagers. It is gold intensive admittedly, but a lot of civs would actually have a really hard time finding a good response to this, given their own tech tree gaps, with the exception maybe of a very strong paladin civ. The closest we have to a real-life example of this composition in action is probably from the Goths, who can field Huskarls working as their Eagle Warrior stand-in, combined with hand cannons and bombard cannons. Goths actually have an above-average track record in the late game for both 1v1s and on a team, which might say good things about our potential all-tech civ. Hindustanis also have a similar sort of deathball composition, with Ghulams, hand cannons, and bombards, albeit with some gunpowder bonuses at play helping out. Still, they're another above-average late-game civ. Maybe a more straightforward, again gold-intensive combo would be fully upgraded Arbalesters or heavy cavalry archers combined with fully upgraded paladins, or possibly battle elephants. This sounds a lot like the Magyars, having a good archery range and paladin combo, which are surprisingly a pretty average late-game civ. Though remember, unlike Magyars, we're throwing in extra options, like hand and bombard cannons, a much better swordsman line, and a lot more choice at the stable. Personally, I'm starting to feel okay about our all-tech civ holding up late, especially given your opponent has no idea what unit transitions they can expect. Fully upgraded trash is also quite rare in the game, with Spanish being the only civ that currently have all 3 fully upgraded trash units. That's not just a factor in 1v1 trash wars, but having solid trash units to round out any composition really never hurts. So maybe an all-tech civ wouldn't be as bad as it seems at first. Existing evidence and intuition suggests they'd probably be the worst civ in the Dark and Feudal Age, being still probably below average in Castle Age depending on the civ matchup, though maybe you could find some currently impossible unit combo that could do well. In Imperial Age, I'd argue they really start to get rolling though, rising to the level of being average or even above average. It might depend on the civ matchup, but I suspect they'd be best against other jack-of-all-trades civs such as Byzantines, simply because you just have a better version of that type of civ strength, and it's the extremely aggressive civs like Mongols that you'd have to watch out for. I'm curious if you guys can think of any other good unit combos that an all-tech civ could make which I overlooked, and if you think of a good one, let me know. That'll do it for this one though. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.